All right. Welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are and when you're watching. Welcome to another edition of one of these fireside chats that we've been doing. This is our second edition, and we have a pretty cracking lineup for today. And today we're going to talk something about something that's a bit controversial, it's a bit dividing, but it's also very current. And what we're talking about is maximizing impact, why funding alone is not the solution for defense and dual use technologies and startups. Now, my name is Fareed. I'm one of the general partners at Startup Wise Guys, the Cyber Defense Fund. And I have two panelists and two friends, I would say, who've come to join and talk to us for the next 45 minutes. We're expecting one more, and the moment they join, we'll put them into the live stream. They're based out of Ukraine, so sometimes they don't have connectivity. So we'll see if they're able to join. But for now, I have two great panelists, great participants who are joining us. And we're going to hand over to them and let them talk a little bit more about what they do and things like that. But if you're watching us live, you can ask questions on the LinkedIn and the YouTube and the Facebook comments. If you put in the comments over there, those questions come straight up over here, and I can ask them to the panelists in real time, which is great because you don't have to wait till the end. You don't have to wait till later on Q&A session. We try and make this as spontaneous as conversational as let's say controversial as well as possible. So we'd love to hear some of the questions, and we're going to ask them live to our panelists. Now, we've got two panelists over here. We got Mikhil and Misha. I'm going to first introduce Mikhil a little bit, and Mikhil's going to take over and tell us a little bit about himself. But the fun fact of with Mikhil is that I met him. We've got Ivan as well, who's joined. Thanks a lot. So this is, as we say, in the intro you saw brave, ambitious, but it's also uncertain, and this is all what is there in defense and dual use. So I'm going to first start with introducing a little bit about Mikhil, or at least how I know Mikhil. And Mikhil, the fun fact about Mikhil is I met him because of this unusual mix of being a person who is very heavily into the startup spaces, and he'll tell you a little bit more about it. He's a startup-friendly person in defense and cyber and the government and a few other things. And this makes him like one of those people that has like a whole breadth of contradictory and kind of motivational elements. And I love that about having him here. And to be honest, it is very difficult to find time with him. So I'm so grateful that Mikhil, you managed to join us. So if you can introduce yourself for a minute, tell us a little bit about what you do, what hats you're wearing right now, and then I'll go over to Misha and Ivan, who I'll also introduce a little bit, and then they can tell us a little bit more. Mikhil.
Thank you, Fareed, for the welcome, and I'm glad to be here and honored to be here. So, among my other hats, I'm Deputy Commander for Estonian Cyber Command. Also here I put CR14, which is the cyber range platform and NATO cyber range platform in Estonia, and which is the community where we actually incubate startups and over open cyber range. So I'm in part of the supervisory board there. And my third hat is that I'm also an expert in IT Coalition, which is led by Estonia and Luxembourg, which aims to kind of help to rebuild the ICT capabilities in Ukraine and MOD and armed forces. So I would use these three hats while I'm introducing myself, and I'll give it back to you. Thank you.
And fantastic. And we keep the startup hat for later on, because I know that it's very rare to find people with this kind of, different hats, but also being very startup friendly. So that's why you were the first name in my mind when we thought about this panel. Next, I'm going to go to Misha, because I met Misha quite briefly at one of the events that was organized by Ragnar SAS, which is one of the defense tech meetups. And I was listening afar, and it just the what they tried to do and what they're achieving right now just caught my attention, just from a perspective of where they were and where they've got and the mistakes they made and things like that. So I'm super excited that he said yes. It was I don't know how how people say yes when I ask them to join me here. But Misha, tell us a little bit about what you do in a minute, and then we'll move over to some polling questions after Ivan tells us a little bit more about. But go ahead, and I think you're muted, so go ahead and tell us. There we go.
Of course, Farid, I said yes because you asked very nicely. I am Misha Rudiminsky. I'm co-founder in Chimera. We build tactical communication systems for Ukrainian defense and armed forces. We've been doing this one of the newly created companies. We've started after the start of the full-scale invasion. We're just a bit older than 2 years, but we're now present in almost every type of combat unit in Ukrainian armed forces.
There we go. So that's a great introduction. I love the fact you went from war starting to now pretty much in combat, pretty much with every unit. And we'll talk about this later on in the session about some of the failures and learnings. And I love that about you, what you mentioned about how many software releases you did. But I'm not going to give anything away. Now I'm going to go to our final panelist, Ivan, who's joined us. Again, Ivan, I know that both you and Misha are super time sensitive as well. You guys got other things to do, but I'm glad that you could join. And the fun fact about Ivan is that Ivan is a second-time founder. While his first company is still doing really, really well, but decided to go, mission-driven and build another company, which I think is going to change a lot of the reality on the ground or in the air in Ukraine. Ivan, tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing here.
Thanks for such a warm intro. But I'm actually the first-time founder. Only two of those that were successfully.
That's good. Two-time failure, two-time success. That's good.
Yeah, 50-50. I like to say that I'm the serial founder. I founded lots of different companies, failed in some, succeeded in some. And since the full-scale invasion, I joined the armed forces, then went through the infantry forces up to some special units I cannot disclose. And since the time I was working with lots of different drones. And now we're solving, I'm still on duty, so I'm kind of shaping two different realities into one life. And we are working on decreasing the cost per ISR mission. That's in a nutshell what we do, by reducing the human factor in mission planning and mission execution.
All right, that sounds great. I let you explain what ISR is in one of the later questions as well to a lot of people, because some of people are joining us for the first time. And before we're going to kick this off. It's going to be a free for all eventually. But before we start, I just want to kind of clarify one thing, which is this term dual use defense. This is a new term that's been coined. I say new, it's been there for 4 years, but it's only hit the limelight right now purely because so what dual use means is a technology, a product or service that was developed either for civilian use and is being used for defense, or was built for defense and being used for civilian use. There's different thoughts that say that it was one first and the other, but it was basically coined because nobody wanted to invest in defense alone. And we're also seeing that change, right? So the people who are joining us, they need to know what dual use defense. I've had this question in a lot of conferences I've been to as well. They ask me what's this dual use defense? So now that we've cleared that up, I want to start this conversation. I'm going to try and make it as free for all, but kind of leading some of the solutions, some of the talking points. So the first question that I have, and this is a poll for everybody who's listening to us, you can write on the Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube comments. And the question that I'm asking is, have we finally seen the awakening of dual-use defense startups in the startup world? So have we actually seen in the past 6 months a final awakening? I know we've been working in this since 2017, 2018, this vertical, but has this finally happened that we're seeing a lot more of them come up? What do we think? Out of our panelists, anyone who thinks that the awakening has happened can raise their hand. Anyone who thinks that this is just the start and it's not fully there can keep it down. So anybody who thinks the awakening has fully happened? Okay, this is interesting because in the latest European Defense Fund conference, they all said that this is it, this is the peak time. So I'm going to go over to Mikhail to kind of get his view of what's happening in the dual. I mean, you've mentioned multiple hats. Do we see any dual-use defense startups come up? Is there enough supply? Is there enough demand in this? Where are we right now from where you sit?
Okay, it's a tricky question because it has many kind of let's say caveats or biases in that sense. So we have to kind of look at the current situation in Ukraine, and then we have to look at the Western militaries. So while the Western militaries are operating under the peacetime, and their kind of planning cycle is 10 years, let's say, roughly, then in Ukraine we see a totally different kind of approach where we have units who are actually developing solutions and technologies on field, like next to the units, I don't know, platoon, or maybe a battalion level. So in that sense, I would say that for the peacetime establishment, this hasn't happened because military itself, probably, and militaries themselves do not actually kind of emphasize that, or kind of they are not embracing that, I would say, even while in Ukraine it's happening, but it's happening fast. But on the other hand, to kind of get there to the front is hard. So otherwise, I would say that we are still in a bit of a status quo. There is more money on the market because of the war, but otherwise, yeah, everybody is thinking how to use the technology that is there in the war effort, and unfortunately on both sides, so does Russia. So we are not there yet. I think there has to be a lot of kind of big changes if we want to kind of boost that really to peak.
Okay. Ivan, I'm going to go over to you because this is multiple startups for you. You've done the non-defense startups as well, and now you're doing a defense startup. What's happened? I mean, how has the environment been for you for the last 6 months?
It was completely changed. I mean, first of all, yeah, as you know, we also launched the Defense Builder Accelerator. So I do know about lots of different startups in defense in Ukraine. So we are basically focused on helping Ukrainian defense startups grow faster by basically giving them basic knowledge. So in my opinion, more than half startups in defense area in Ukraine do not even know the word startup. You know, they do not know that fact that they're doing actually technologically technological creative new startup, something like this. And yeah, basically most of them are somehow connected to some military units like brigades, as you already shared. Because what is the biggest driver for those startups in Ukraine? The fastest feedback loop. I mean, our engineers can go to the battlefield, work with actual militaries, see the feedback, touch those drones by their hands, like to work with them and actually operate those drones in the battlefield environment by their own and see what was the actual problem. This fastest bit feedback loop is the thing that unfortunately happened, but we kind of have some fortune from that. We gonna have this as an advantage to boost our defense tech. So I personally know like more than 200 defense tech startups in Ukraine, and
but
all
do you
of
think
them
this
are.
is the peak? Do you think this is the peak, or do you think it's going to be thousands
It's
of
gonna
them?
be more. It's
There's
gonna
going to
be
be more.
thousands.
It's just the
for
start.
sure. That's just a start because those who did not know how to raise money, even like some small amount of money, like a couple of dozen of thousands, like 50K, is kind of problem for them. But I know that for VCs in the Western world, that's money which can be invested just into the pre-product stage, you know, like just on a blank idea. Because of this circumstances and this crazily high opportunity of developing new things. And we're trying to build this bridge between those two worlds, which Mikhail actually shared pretty good. Like that's absolutely two different world. If you operate in a defense tech in a peaceful environment, you're thinking like 5-10 years roadmap. Here, things that we've developed half a year ago today might be useless. So we have to do way faster iterations. And I
That's
believe
crazy.
that once we build the bridges, there will be hundreds and maybe even thousands of different startups.
Okay. I'm going to go to Misha. Misha, any thoughts? Do you guys agree? Because you also started just when the war started, right?
Yeah. I think one thing we can see already is that even compared to some of the we are a new company compared to what usually exists in the defense industry, but there are companies. Ivan started. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think a year after us, when we were starting, most people were either focusing on the companies that were building before the full-scale invasion, or not looking to build something completely new. We kind of put an emphasis on building step by step into playing in the long game, and then more and more companies. And I think 2023 only was the year, and then not even the beginning of 2023, when it all kind of exploded in Ukraine. And just another example, right? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Anduril is the first kind of new defense tech company that became a prime in the world, apart from Ukraine, which we are in a fairly unique conditions, right? We can see this is only, I think the peak or explosion is actually going to be when all these defense companies that are now growing are going to be doing IPOs and are going to be becoming primes and replacing old, very often outdated companies that don't progress as fast, that don't innovate as fast. So when we see those companies replacing en masse existing
Okay.
old primes, that's, I think, is going to be the actual peak explosion.
So essentially, what you're saying is that we're waiting for the Googles and Facebooks of the defense world to come up, because only a company with a startup DNA that they remember can really foster the startups of their particular vertical, which is interesting. I mean, both Mikhail, like you made a really good point about this peaceful and like war zone kind of environments, and some would say like I would probably say that in the peace world, like I mean, going to Brussels and Spain and Italy and Portugal, like the sense of urgency is not there. Like I don't even think that they realize what like the world has to do for dual use defense, and it's been pushed down from the EU. But I completely agree. Like sitting here in the Baltics and in the CE region, you really understand the urgency, and it's a different game, including the VC. So I think it's a really good point. And then the question that kind of that really kind of came up to my head is that, is this happening fast enough? Like, are we seeing the change that we want to see? Ivan, do you think like you raised a non-defense company, now you're raising a defense company? Has there been a quick change? What's this change been like? What do founders look forward to now in this space?
Lots of changes. I mean, like it's absolutely different environments. Here you have to raise from specific investors who are focused on the dual use of defense as the number one priority. Because like I've done more than 500 calls with different investors for the last half a year, and I was talking to too many different investors, like those who usually invest to SaaS, for example, is my previous expertise, and they were absolutely not in the environment. They do not understand like what I'm talking about. But once I've met that defense tech focused VC, the pitch was just a couple of minutes, like a couple of phrases, they understood all the things. So you should be focused on this kind of investors. And the second one, you have absolutely understandable proof of your product. If it works on the battlefield in Ukraine, and none of your competitors in the Western world can solve the problem that you are solving with the same cost, you'll definitely be a winner. Like that's the only point you have to prove. Comparing to other areas, you have to show some metrics in growth of users, then customer acquisition cost, and so on. Here is absolutely easy to understand how it can work. Like if it works on the battlefield in Ukraine, an affordable cost, awesome. You will be successful if you haven't messed up all other things like the legal, financials, and so on.
Okay. Do you want to also tell, I mean, you mentioned you made 500 calls to investors. Do you want to also confirm, or you want to tell the world what your status is with respect to raising a round? Because I think that was pretty impressive. I don't want to say anything, but if you want to share, you can share.
Yeah. We are sharing that we have successfully raised 2.2 million during the half, I don't know, like a couple of months. Yeah, and this money will be enough for us to definitely cover our traction for the next couple of, like half a year, even a year maybe.
Do you think you would have managed to raise this money 3 years ago?
For defense tech, no, for sure.
Okay, so there's been
this money. Yeah, that's definitely in the defense tech. It was absolutely like kind of huge change in the understanding what is actually needed on the battlefield. Because
Mhm.
as you can see, like lots of Western ammunition and like loiter munitions and other new tech solutions were sent to Ukraine, and that's nothing new information that lots of them failed in some different reasons. But the whole idea that those who were working on the defense were not facing the reality of the modern warfare.
Okay.
Mostly they were fighting like against absolutely weaker enemy. But now we have, unfortunately, really strong one, and we have to defend from enormous amount of drones, both reconnaissance and with the payloads.
Okay.
Electronic warfare devices are changing like rapidly on the enemy side, so we have to do counter electronic warfare devices and so on.
Okay, so let's pause there. So I'm going to let Misha come in, but before Misha, Mikhail, you've got this hat of like CR-14, which has both like the NATO and the open range as well. Do you think that there's been a change in the government in, let's say, the different hats that you're wearing towards dual use? Has the change been fast enough, or do you want it to be faster, or can it not get any faster?
Well, in Estonia, it has been really fast. So basically,
Mhm.
but we're a small nation and we've been under occupation, so we have a quite good understanding what's kind of what's in the store for Ukraine. So they need to win this war, and we need to win this war with them. So I think those nations are moving fast and trying to kind of also put government money in this market to kind of subsidize it. Now, on the other hand, you mentioned several nations where you don't kind of sense the urgency right now, because for them, I think Ukraine has fallen in news, like out of top 3 at least. So they
Mhm.
might be in top 5. So there is no kind of immediate urgency. And I would say that while European Union is doing a lot of stuff to kind of support this area, it still goes kind of under the peacetime rules. So it means that the vehicle is kind of designed to be really slow, and this doesn't kind of help to kind of push a lot of kind of funding actually to the startups. So fortunately, we have now defense VCs kind of coming in who are basically trying to support kind of narrowing this gap. So while you are applying for the European kind of EDF, European defense funding, for example, then it's kind of, it starts working together. But still, kind of the industrial base, and I would say even the academic kind of community is not there fully. So basically, once they start missing planes because of the GPS jamming that we get in Estonia and stuff like that, then I think kind of their awareness raises. But right now, yeah, those two worlds are quite apart from each other. Yeah.
Do you think things can be faster in Estonia and the CE region as well?
Um,
Or do you think it'll be haphazard and crazy to do that? Like we might make more mistakes.
you have to specify the question now, otherwise I would.
No, I'm just saying, thinking like the we know that you use this word like peacetime rules and wartime rules, and we're talking about like the change that has happened in the past 6-8 months in dual use just from the government, and I know that it's changed. Like in Estonia, I mean, it's changed a lot. It's become faster. But do you think that it can go faster? Do you think that there's an appetite for it or the need for it to even go faster? Or do you think that if you go any faster, we might make mistakes. We might put technology. We might fund technology that might be for the harm in the long run, or might, I don't know, some. Is there like, I'm trying to understand like why can't we go faster? That's my question.
We probably can go faster, but right now, again, the thing that I mentioned earlier, this kind of a 10-year planning cycle. So this is kind of this is disruptive what's happening right now. But we understand what Ivan was mentioning about the drones. So FPVs and the recon drones are basically one of the key elements in this war, which were not there in the last war. And if we discuss kind of two conventional armies fighting each other, then there's a different war that we have seen so far in different regions. So we have to change. We have to be able to kind of embrace those new technologies and make sure that we have both. We have the capability and also kind of capabilities to kind of, let's say, defense against those technologies. So there's a sense of urgency, at least in this region, which is next to the Russian border, that we need to kind of change. There's a kind of a famous saying, and it's a cliche in a way, that we are preparing for the next war from the lessons from the last war. And but at the same time, you have to understand that all the last war's elements are still always there. So basically, you have to kind of you have to use those conflicts to learn and upgrade your own capabilities.
Okay, I wanted to wait for Misha to give a comment, but he's disappeared. But he'll probably come back once the internet gets sorted. This is one of the advantages of doing it in an environment where two of our panelists are in a wartime situation. But I mean, I also wanted to point out over here, like, Startup Wise guys, we're one of the largest investor in dual use and defense with over 40 investments. Right, we've been doing this since 2017, so it's actually really good to see this speed increase. And but now the question that I really want to know is throwing money at the problem the only thing that we need to do, or can we do something else? And I'm gonna start with Ivan here, because Ivan, you're the one who's receiving this money, obviously being thrown. I don't mean thrown in a bad way. I mean like access to. But is funding alone going to make us move faster? What else is needed?
You mean the funding to the armed forces? Yep, not just for startups.
No, to the startup. Funding to the startup, funding to dual defense investors, funding in this vertical of startups and investors. Like, do you think just like giving more money, like the government is pumping more money to this vertical, is going to help? If not, someone else. Or if so, yeah, sure.
Definitely should be money, but the money should be spent wisely. I mean, and should be shared wisely. What I mean, that we should support early initiatives with small checks to see the traction. That's the only case and the only chance. I mean, I'm facing, and lots of our startups in our circle facing the same issue. Before the proof on the battlefield, it's really hard to get the first investment. But once you have the proof on the battlefield, you'll be having so many like requests from different investors who want to invest. So there is an amazing opportunity to invest with small checks into small teams, just based on the team traction without the product. I mean, in the prep product stage. Okay. That's number one we should do and consider if we're talking about money. Yeah, but also we have to be focused on the joint venture R&Ds between like Ukrainian expertise of the battlefield. I mean, both militaries and ex-militaries, and some engineers who are close to the militaries, and some engineers in the civil environment. First of all, because you have better access to the money, obviously, because of the legal and physical risks. And secondly, because sometimes you do have way more technologies and way higher technologies that we do. For example, in the Bunter Aerospace, we also have the let's call it joint project with the Danish Technological University. Okay. They actually helped us to design part of our software, which actually performed great, and we integrated into our software. That saved us both money, time, and their expertise were installed into our software in an amazing way. And the only thing we've done it, just texted them. I mean, like, we are doing that. Maybe you can help us somehow. That's the only thing we can do.
Okay, Mikhail, your thoughts? Like, is only throwing money the option? What's happening? How do we solve this problem?
Well, obviously, I agree with Ivan on every aspect here. So I would say that even during the peacetime, you have to have a customer for your product. So right now, I think having a great team and having a kind of problem definition, and especially in defense, you need to have somebody to vouch for it that it is actually a problem from the military kind of community. So this would be one thing that I would kind of see, that the military is actually, especially the peacetime establishment, now kind of forward. Now we have the CR-14 as a platform to do that, but many of the nations do not have it, and the Ukraine obviously has many units who have their unique problems during their kind of location, let's say, or kind of during their mission set. So again, but they have also a lot of experts who can vouch whether this is an actual problem or not. So I think there should be some verification that we are actually trying to solve the real problem. Otherwise, it would be kind of easy to, let's say, fool a VC to kind of saying it makes sense to dual use in dual use, and it definitely will pass the logic test. But would it actually kind of be useful on the battlefield? Because we have seen really expensive weapon systems turned out to be really inefficient kind of during the actual battlefield, despite the fact that their specs say that they have a huge kind of success rate.
Okay, understood. And I'm going to kind of summarize all of this, but we have Misha back. So Misha, the question that I was asking everybody was, if the topic of the conversation today, like, is throwing money at the startup, the vertical of dual use defense, or even to investors of dual use defense, like, is throwing money going to accelerate or change the trajectory in any way, or is only throwing money good enough, or do we need to do something else?
So I'll first agree with everything that we said by Michal and Ivan. Second, I'll say I think there should be more money thrown at this problem. But then one thing that actually needs to change is the procurement process, because the current procurement process is made for long cycles where, and kind of coming back to the older question where I actually had something to say, but my connectivity got out. Yeah, so basically was right now and up until right now, how the procurement process works is in every military in the world is that there's a company that develops something for numbers of years, up to a decade, then it goes into procurement, and then like potentially in 5 to 10 years, you actually are able to test it somewhere in the real world environment. This is the thing about defense tech, is that it's almost the only industry where you can, if you're in software, even if you're in like health tech, you can test, you can show here, it actually works in real world environment. Defense tech is the only, might be not the only, but one of the only industries where it is actually good when you don't have anywhere to test it. Ideally, in the real world, we wouldn't need to have anywhere to test defense technology, right? But that's another problem. You have all that huge cycle. You already the government already spent billions of dollars to buy it, and then you get something like war of Russia in Ukraine, where you have a first technologically advanced enemy since since collapse of the Soviet Union, where a progressive, modern, democratic country can actually test their technology. And it is true that a lot of it is not viable because they didn't know small tricks. The technology is advanced, but you actually on practice learn what works, what doesn't work. And what needs to happen is that procurement process right now is not adapted. Even Ukraine was, we changed a lot of things in Ukraine, and the processes are changing. Still, even with how fast everything moving in Ukraine, the process is still too slow. At least I believe, though, that, and we are already exposed to clients outside of Ukraine, and there the process is just painfully slow. Where by the point, our take is by the time we go into procurement with those clients, in the next year or two, we'll already learn so much that we'll have another product to provide to them, and we'll have reasons why the product that we are currently providing them needs to be replaced with a newer one. So we kind of need to plan for the future, because the things are changing so much faster, and the existing procurement process is just not made for such fast changes. And I think that's a huge thing that needs to change if we want to see, new companies replacing primes and the actual disruption to happen in defense technology. The procurement cycle needs to adapt from 10-year cycle where Like, for example, just in our comparison, our main competitor globally has done 4 versions of their protocol for 40 years. We've done, and you mentioned, like, you didn't want to say how many iterations. We've done, we own the 7th version of hardware, and we own the 70th version of firmware. Last time we talked 2 weeks ago, we was on 69. So, like, we launched a new firmware update in the last 2 weeks, and we're probably going to do the next one in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We're in 70th version of firmware, on 7th version of hardware in the last 2 years, and we're still accelerating in our growth rate. And obviously, it's very hard to adopt this. Combine this 10-year procurement cycle with the product that changed so much over the last 2 years, because a lot of things we've done, and that's the same with Ivan and so many companies, things we've done a year ago, some of them are actually still working, some of them don't work anymore, and this is just not a fit that can, and the investors would also like the faster procurement cycle will allow investors to see the returns faster and more money to flow into defense. They wouldn't need to wait 10 years to see the results.
Okay, so let me summarize this. So I mean, the question was, should we throw money, or is throwing money the only thing that's needed? And from the sound of it, throwing more money is needed, but also like having access to market, which is something that I've always, like, anybody who speaks to me, I always tell them, like, there is enough money, there's enough late stage money in this market. Like, if you're looking to raise a Series A, Series B, there enough VCs will give you the money because you're not a risk anymore. And I mean, Ivan pointed out, it's like the pre-seed, the first checks, which are not coming through, because this is the same question we asked to the European Defense Fund and to at this conference in Brussels last week, was that they mentioned so many metrics, and I had to really tell them, like, hey, you need to understand that early stage money is different, and you need to really tell us what early stage money is going and what late stage money is going, and also making sure that there's access to market. And this was another thing. I mean, one of the things that we work on is the NATO Diana accelerator, which is a NATO specific accelerator, obviously kind of spurred on by the war and the urgency of it. And I had the luxury to work with some great startups there, but their biggest problem was the fact that the access to market was just so difficult. And once you go through that access to market, the procurement cycle, which was fantastic. Like, the moment Misha said procurement, all the heads in my video, all the heads simultaneously went, yeah, that's a big problem right now, right? So I think it's good to kind of hear that is there, and maybe this is something that the West should be copying. Maybe this is what the peacetime rules should be copying. Shouldn't be like, oh, let's invest in, but it should be like, hey, how have these guys changed the procurement cycle? Because this is what's going to be the biggest bottleneck as well, right? And I think from a perspective of access to market, this is something that the Ukraine war has brought for a lot of the startups, even in Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland, is the access to this market, right? Not from a market of buying, but a market for testing, right? And I think every one of you kind of suggested that. But I mean, now going back to, I don't know if anybody else has to. I mean, Mikhail, Ivan, do you guys want to add anything to this? But I mean, it sounds like there needs to be more money. There needs to be money for early stage, and there needs to be access to market. And this opportunity of, like, testing in market, especially in Ukraine, shouldn't be wasted away, right? That's what we're all saying.
I have one comment here. So the question is valid. My question is whether we are asking the right question. I think the question is not the money. Question is kind of how we handle it. Procurement is a nice word. Procurement is something that we know. Procurement rules have made to kind of ensure transparency and equal treatment of different companies and so on and so forth. But looking throughout the history, then all the kind of the major improvements during the wartime most of them have come out of kind of hiding hundreds of scientists in secret bases or somewhere, basically, where they were developing those technologies. So we are basically in a different environment right now. And my question is whether we need to kind of adjust to it and find a kind of combination between those old and new kind of approaches. So I would say that running a kind of innovation fund, which would say that you will compete for the kind of the capability development, would make more sense, because then you can kind of produce those kind of as a company, you can produce those solutions quicker, and then you will have the kind of you know that the scaling is there if your solutions work. It doesn't have to be that the only one, the best one wins, but it can be that four different companies are kind of capable of doing those capabilities. But this environment kind of also not only ensures that they have the scalability, but also kind of allows some knowledge spillover and kind of interaction with the community. So I would kind of invite to think new models how to kind of make it work.
So new models of engagement between dual use startups, capital, and the market.
Yeah.
Right. Basically, the three edges of a triangle. Right. And this is quite key because we're seeing this happen. We're seeing the NATO Innovation Fund. We're seeing that again. My belief is the guys who sign 15 million euro checks can't sign a 50,000 or 100,000 euro checks. They don't know the risk assessment, right? And I think this is the problem that we're at. This is the problem. Like, we're an early stage investor, startup wise guys. We love to invest in, starting people off, starting companies off, so we have ROI after that. But I think like what happens is when suddenly we start thinking big amount of money, we start thinking 2, 3, 4, 500 million, $1 billion funds. The problem is that we start associating big checks with them. Right? We think like, oh, we got to sign a 20 million check, 5 million check, 15 million check, and I think that we need to find this perfect, like you said, triangle between the money, the solution, kind of go to market, so to speak, and the solution, right? And you're right that these wartime rules and peacetime rules, we need like pretty much like a wartime rule. Think of it like the Secret Service within a peacetime rule, kind of doing this development in like a skunk works lab, right? Kind of thing. So I don't know if that's. I mean, I don't know if the U.S. went to the extreme over there with a lot of unsanctioned and unknown developments, and so you have that extreme as well. But I wanted to kind of start with Ivan and Misha just to kind of understand from the perspective of getting customers and actually getting your product to them. How did you guys how are you guys doing this? Because the biggest hassle that I hear a lot of companies say is that, oh, the biggest problem we have is the time cycle it takes for a company or for a customer to try our product, to like our product, to then forget the procurement cycle. It's just like making the decision up. Now, I know you guys are in Ukraine, but have you tried this with other armed forces? What's the cycle like, and what's changed?
You mean outside of Ukraine?
Ivan, go for it.
Sorry. You mean the other countries, armed forces, yeah?
Outside of Ukraine.
I would say that, in my experience, that's basically pretty the same as in Ukraine. It really depends on the military unit. I mean, they have plenty of those Defense Innovation Unit in US, in UK, National Security Innovation Fund, and so on, like DIANA, NATO. So lots of different initiatives in the armed forces, in the Department of Defense, Ministry of Defense, and inside of different divisions or brigades. So they are interested. There are some who are like the more old school one, but you can also find those who are pretty interested in the battlefield experience in Ukraine. And if your product based on that experience, they will be more than interested to test it and then advocate it to those who make the procurement. So the only thing you have to do, just talk to them.
Talk to them. Misha, what about you? Have you had similar experiences?
I would say, depending on the country, I definitely see, obviously the countries that are, Central Eastern Europe, they're moving a bit faster. I would say my experience, the US seems like they saw a lot of the very expensive weapons become irrelevant. Not all of it, like some of them very relevant. Some of the very expensive weapons that the war passed to Ukraine became irrelevant over the last 2 years, which were, winning and basically a game changer 2 years ago, almost not used anymore because of the things that are changing in the front line. And so, in those, specifically those countries that did transfer a lot of their weaponry to Ukraine, they learned a lot from it, and they figured out that they are not as prepared as they wanted to be, and there are more and more thinkers in those, in the MOD, in the DODs, and the etc., and in the army itself, general staff, and so on of different countries, where they're like, shit, we need to be we need to move faster, we need to change things, we need to learn. And some of at least our take right now is that we can see that a big chunk of what we provide, for our product to the Western allies is not the only product itself, is the expertise that we're bringing, because most of these armies didn't fight a war for a while. Some of them for a short period of time, some for a big. And even if they did fight, it was like a small, special operations, Marines, over the seas, across the seas, somewhere far. And so they need to learn, they figure out, we don't know how to do a lot of things that Ukraine is now doing, so we need to learn, and they are starting to move faster. But still, compared to what is going in Ukraine, I would still say there is like almost an order of magnitude difference, and there are countries who are not worried at all. Like nothing has changed. Like it seems like they don't even know the war with Russia is going on right now from how you communicate with them. There is no sense of urgency. So there are very different types of communications, at least we are having with different clients around the world.
Okay. Now, I'm going to Mikhail, I don't know if you want to have anything to add on this, but I have a different question for you, which is a question that came to me after we decided to run this fireside chat, which is a question about, so Estonia has conscription, right? Which basically means that pretty much all adult males have gone through a process of some kind of familiarization with the armed forces. And a lot of them also have this concept in Estonia of the Estonian Defense League, which is basically a kind of a reservist force that sits alongside the Estonian Defense Forces. And do you think, and this is a question that came to me, and I'm going to pass it on to Misha and Ivan after, Mikhail, you've talked about it a little bit. Do you think this actually accelerates the urgency? I say this because we had this showcase 2 weeks ago with a few defense companies. And I had the kind of privilege to kind of take around a lot of different visitors to see these companies. And it was fantastic. All the Estonian visitors who were not even in the armed forces had a really strong connection with operational requirements, with requirements in the battlefield, with ideas on how to improve certain things, with connections on who they could connect them, who were still in the armed forces. It kind of felt like the system had somehow short-circuited in a good way to move things faster. So do you think that this is a result of the fact that there is conscription? And I know conscription is like a kind of used as a bad term in a lot of other Western countries. Talk to me a little bit about this. Like, is this a good thing, bad thing? Has it helped? This could be one of the answers?
So
controversial, I know.
Yeah, no, it's actually a good question, and it is definitely important. So usually males who have went through the conscription discuss at least at some age during the part is the conscription part. So there's a saying that the real Estonian man has to do 3 things: go through the conscription, sing at the song festival, and do a Tartu ski marathon, so 63 clicks. So it is important thing that connects us, and obviously it connects us different levels. And I used to be a commander of the biggest volunteer unit in Estonia as well until February. And so my unit alone increased 50%. So basically the people who didn't have conscript experience, a lot of them came to the reserve unit to gain this experience. So I would say that this is definitely one thing that connects us and also kind of helps us to establish a really good communication line in terms of with those people if we want to develop something. So I had a lot of calls this February 24 from my own reservists, from different companies, from the Defense League people. So how can we help? So, and definitely kind of this is one of the things, and the probably best example of this, how this can work, and we are kind of driving towards that end is Israel. So how we have seen that their kind of military training has united their kind of society, because it gives them one common language, at least in one area. So it is a definitely value to have, and it's not an individual training in Estonia. So one more important thing here is that we train our reservists as units, so we can raise them up in matter of hours, and they will be as units. So we don't have to go this through the additional training. So this also kind of helps them to kind of see this the issues like in a different perspective. So definitely, I would say that this is helpful.
And you think that this will result in better startups being born? Because a lot of these guys in Estonia, they've got that mentality of what it's like, the reality.
Definitely. So we have a lot of startups right now who are former cybercom conscripts, for example. So doing BMS style thing. Then we have a mix of different non-commissioned officers and officers who are basically doing something similar to Palantir Census School. So we see these kind of groups are constantly kind of raising up new capabilities, and we see next to Milrem Robotics, there is one new company who are doing this similar kind of product. So, and one uniting kind of one commonality that they have some kind of formal military training behind them, whether it's conscription, whether it's reserve kind of stuff. So this is something that is common to all of them.
So there's something interesting to think. Now, I'm going to all the people who are listening to us, if you have any questions, you can put them in the comments. We're going to ask. We've got 9 more minutes left. And so we have some time for questions, but I'm going to now quickly move to Ivan and Misha. Maybe Misha, you first. Do you think that something like, now, of course, in Ukraine, pretty much everybody who's an adult male is either serving in the armed forces or is somehow connected to industries that are, to the, let's say, the war machinery, so to speak, right? Do you think that this would have been an easier thing if there was conscription, or do you think that because this is in place now, you're getting better startups compared to the West, where people have a choice to start a marketing startup or advertising startup instead of a defense startup?
I think that I don't know the answer. Could have been, would have been, all of that. What I can say is that from what I see, most of the defense companies right now started that I've talked to are, by like tech founder. The same. Ivan is a case where he actually, went into the army during the full-scale invasion, but so many other founders as me, we didn't go into, and I'm trying to be like, showing the bravery and saying that if not for Chimera, I would probably also be in the army. I don't know. I would want to think so, but this is like the second. I like to say this is the second best thing I can do, and so.
In the war machinery, so that's good. Like that's there's what you can do in Chimera probably kind of is amplified in the armed forces, right? So that's good. That's what I'm saying. That do you think that having that connection to the armed forces, whether it's through our startup, whether through its conscription, helps? Like, are you guys able to solve these problems because of your proximity? Your friends were in the armed forces. People in the armed forces now.
Of course, the first clients, users we had were family members, friends of friends, friends of family members, etc. And you have the motivation and sense of urgency because what you're doing is directly influencing your own and security of your closest people. So I would say, 100%. The defense tech industry that Ukraine now bolsters, where we have more manufacturing capacity than our government can procure, is because they don't have enough money to buy all of the stuff that can be produced by all the manufacturers in Ukraine, only exists because of huge mobilization of all the smartest people. And there are people right now living very comfortable, high-paying jobs in Ukraine, engineering jobs, to go and do defense tech because that's what they wanted to commit. And it is always a battle, and I studied engineering university, and my professor told us, and it's a very usual thing in engineering, when professors of engineering say, please just don't go and make weapons. And it's like a very, usually defense tech, all the military tech is a very kind of, it's a way, oh, do I want to make stuff that's gonna, kill people, blow up things? But right now in Ukraine, this is is a question of security, and it's actually, it is the thing that saves lives. So in a way, doing defense tech is almost like a humanitarian work for Ukrainian. It's you protecting your close ones, and there's very little people who will say otherwise, who are in Ukraine. So you have the smartest people in the Ukraine right now working on this technology, and that's definitely, I would say, changing the speed of execution and speed of innovation.
Okay, Ivan, I'm gonna ask you the question, but I'm gonna rephrase it because we have 5 minutes left, and I want like closing remarks here in a minute, right? So my question to you, Ivan, would be anything you want to add to this, but if there's one thing that you could change or you could ask for besides funding and besides access to market, what would it be as a startup founder in dual use defense?
I'm not sure how we're gonna make it, because we're kind of doing it right now, and we're doing it in our accelerator as well. But we have to build those bridges between those two absolutely different realities. I just wanted to add one thing to this point that Misha told, that I also was in the infantry forces. It means I was on the zero line and the personal with the personal weapon and the close combat. So I do know what is the defense tech about on the ground. And like those who had this experience or having it on a daily basis have absolutely different type of mindset. I'm kind of doing it not because I actually wanted to make drones or defense tech. I'm doing it to not just defend my homeland, but to survive it. I mean, I want my homeland to survive, and that's why I have to make it. I have to do it. In other parts of the world, not all of the people in defense tech and dual use actually understand what is that about, not in terms of the values, but in terms of some tiny little things that they do not have into their accounts because they haven't have this experience. I mean, once I had the conversation with one of the greatest military units in the Western world, no names, but like they were really impressed that is not the best idea to use Wi-Fi frequencies to operate drones. And I was like, we have 2.5 years from the full-scale invasion, and you haven't discovered this absolutely easy to get information. Like that's the zero line from once you start to work with the defense area, that's something that you have to know. So we have to share our experience with others, and others have also have this as a request. Like we want to have more data about your experience. Somehow it is
making this bridge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somehow
I'm gonna pause you there because I have 1.5 minutes. I want Mikhail to give me like his final, like what would he want? You're muted, Mikhail. You're muted.
Sorry, Ivan said it. So I think, yes, we need to make sure that the Western world actually understands what they're facing, that then their superiority in defense is not for granted for that matter. And obviously we as Estonia are trying to push that heavily. So Slava Ukraini.
Okay, so more than funding, getting that. Misha, anything else you want to add?
No, I was saying Heroyam Slava, answering Mikhail. I said everything, so thank you.
Okay, so we've come to like understand peacetime rules, wartime rules. We kind of got to the conclusion that different funding, like early stage funding, still needs to be made available. We got to the point where we also understood that this bridge between the market, between different armed forces, between different testers, academics, and the front lines. And the doers like Misha, Ivan, and Mikhail. I mean, Mikhail does a lot of things he's not talked about, but the doers need to be connected with the technology. So, at that point, I only have 20 seconds left. So I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. At Wise Guys, we are one of the largest investors, the early stage investors, and we love to make investments in startups like this. So if you know startups who are in the defense and dual use, send them our way. Until the next time, which should be in about a month, we'll see you then. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot.